Mexico independence. Mexico independence began the 16th of September in 1810 and it ended in 27th of September in 1821. This event is described in 4 phases. Each phase means an historical important event. In the phase 1 we have the 1810 to 1811, where it all started with the Grito de Dolores and it ended in the War of Puente de Calderón. In this place, in Puente Calderón, the army of Miguel Hidalgo was by 1,000 of people with torches and rocks and some guns against the realist empire, but all of them have guns and there were more than 50,000 of people. The phase 2 is a little more short, but it's an important event because it started in 1811 to 1830, and here is when the insurgent won a lot of wars and they won a lot of followers that they will continue helping them in the wars. One of the most important wars that occurred in this phase was the San Diego Wall. Phase 3. In the phase 3 there was an intense moment when the insurgent the leader of the insurgent was killed, and it was Jose Maria Morelos. He died and the insurgent lost a lot of power in the region and in the country. This period is also known as the Plan de Iguala. Phase 4, the last phase that started in February 24 of 1821, and in the same year of September 27, Vicente Guerrero attacked the country of Mexico and the General Iturbide. The army of these two leaders walked along the actual Mexico street of Madero, and they reached the Plancha del Zócalo. By doing this, people of Mexico knew they were defeated, and this is when the Mexican independence ended. Empire. This period occurred in the 1821 to 1823. During this time, Mexico was led by a constitutional monarchy. In 24 of February of 1822, 3 groups was voting for political ideas. Each one of them has different ideas, and these 3 groups were the Iturbidistas, Bourbonists, and the insurgents. A few days later, the Iturbidistas were the winners, making Iturbide the first governor. In the night of May 18 of 1822, the Mexican citizens joined a march in the night where they screamed "Viva Iturbide." In March 7 of 1823, Iturbide was removed from the governorship, making him to return to Europe from the port in Veracruz in May 11 of 1823. He returned to Mexico a few days later because he was called a traitor in Europe, same as Mexico. So when he arrived to Mexico, army was surprised him where they arrest him, and they also fusillate him in July 9 of 1823 in Veracruz.
In 1824, Guadalupe Victoria became Mexico's first president. This was the start of Mexico as an independent country without Spanish control. His real name was José Miguel Ramón Adaucto Fernández y Félix, but he changed it in honor of the Guadalupe Virgin and the Mexican insurgents. When he started, he clearly wanted Mexico to be a federal and representative republic. with autonomous powers conform with free states. And that's what he did. He started the public administration and made up the three powers of the federal government. When Mexico became independent, United States wanted to negotiate their fronts and wanted to buy Alta California, New Mexico, and Texas. Mexico didn't want to give their territory to the United States, so they decided to take it. When Texas became a part of the United States and got independent from Mexico, that's when the war started. The Mexican-American War, which happened between 1846 and 1848, had as a consequence for Mexico the loss of thousands of kilometers of territory.
Also known as the Guerra de los Tres Años, began in December 17 of 1857 and it finishes on January 1st of 1861. In that time was Benito Juarez. The war was between liberales and conservadores. The war was so hard that the government tried to lose the respect to the articles.
I'm going to talk about the liberal reforms that take part from 1855 to 1861. It all starts with a revolution of Ayutla, the Ayutla revolution that makes and stops Santa Anna from being a dictator, and I think they kill him. It all starts with that. The first decrees of the reform are the Ley Juarez, Ley Lerdo, and Ley Iglesias. Okay, so Ley Juarez. Ley Juarez is that it makes the church and the noblemen equal to the law. So what it does is that they are judged equally as any other peasant would. The Ley Lerdo is the law that makes a church and makes the church do not have any properties anymore. And it gives them to the people that will subdue them and things like that. Yes, is the law that establishes that the church shouldn't charge poor people for things they would do. Like, for example, every time you go to church and you have to pay, the poor people would have to pay because they were poor. And that's what the Ley Iglesia said, that anything wouldn't be free of charge to the poor people. Okay, so after this, we have a conservative reaction. All this was a liberal part. The conservative reaction is that the church, after it being bestowed of its power, they get furious. So they fight for their power back. Felix Zuluaga, what he does is that he proclaims himself president, even though Benito Juarez was the liberal president of this time. So during 1855 and 1861, Mexico has two presidents, Felix Zuluaga and Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez was for the liberal part, and this guy was for the conservative part. What this provokes is that Benito Juarez has to be he doesn't have a state. His capital is still carriage. Meanwhile, Felix Zuluaga is in Mexico City. He was the one people recognized. This leads to the Reform War between these two guys, between Benito Juarez and Felix Zuluaga. The Reform Wars happened from 1858 to 1869. In this war, what happens is that Benito Juarez comes out victorious, and what he does is that he promises to pay the external debts, like with the U.S., with France, with the United Kingdom, and all those countries that Mexico owed money to after Santana. So he promises to pay these debts, and that's how the liberal claim that they won this reform war from these two periods. I'm going to talk about the French intervention and the Second Empire. This takes place from 1862 to 1867. It all starts when after the Reform Wars, that Mexico, Benito Juárez, promises France, Spain, and England that he will pay them all of that since Santana left. But Mexico goes poor, so they stop paying. And this leads that these three countries grow really angry. And the three of them come to Mexico and establish in Veracruz. And they're like, I'm not gonna leave here until you pay us their money. Benito Juárez gets to an agreement with both Spain and England, but only France stays. France stays mainly because they really wanted to conquer Mexico, and the conservatives wanted France to conquer Mexico and put an empire or something like that, so the church will regain its power and it will be back to a monarchy. Okay, so France, due to all of this, in May 5th, 1862, attacks Puebla, but the Mexicans, even though people thought it was impossible, defeated these French. And after this battle, France came back, but with even more powerful and more troops, and they took over completely over the capital, and therefore took over Mexico. So France takes over, and they established an emperor in 1864, which is called Maximiliano de Habsburgo. They bring him from Austria, like a favor from Napoleon III, which was the reigning France during the time. He grabs this guy Maximiliano de Habsburgo and his wife Carlota and brings them to Mexico as emperors. What happens is that instead of this guy being doing the conservative things, he started doing the liberal things. Instead of being a conservative leader, he was a liberal leader. Lots of things he did were really liberal. But Juárez thought, well, inside he thought that he was a conservative person. So finally, Benito Juárez takes over the control over the country again, defeats the emperor and France, and they kill Maximiliano de Habsburgo. And finally, in 1867, it's back to a republic with Benito Juárez in charge.
After the Second Imperio, the republic was reconstructed. The conservadores were beaten up and they were no more foreign invest. Mexico seemed to achieve progress because they had been the French, and their church was starting to get less power. But there were still a lot of things to get that needed to be done first. Like, for example, a lot of indígenas weren't happy with Juárez being their president. And also the external debt was affecting Juárez because it was rising. But Juárez and Lerdo, to avoid that in the future, they opened schools and recreative centers. Also, they have a penal code and a civil code, and the external debt was paid by most of the end, was almost paid. And also, these soldiers started getting good jobs, and the connection of the telegrapho was starting to grow. Porfirio Diaz was a general that didn't like the political system and how Juárez was directing all the things that he did. So in Mexico, he made El Plan de la Noria that was blaming Juarez for re-electing again and again. And finally, when Juarez died, Lerdo assumed the power. But it was like meanwhile a new president rise. So when Lerdo had to leave the power, Porfirio Diaz gained it. As a president, he renewed a lot of things in the military and in the social life. For example, in the military, he brought new machines that he bought from Europe, and he started renewing it every year. So he bought like a lot of things from Europe just for the military. He also founded the Naval Military School and the Esgrima Military School. He formed militaries with a lot of knowledge in the field of science, industrialization, and all the stuff that had to do with that. Porfirio Diaz invested in a lot of things such as the lights for the street. He brought the cars, the cinema, but all these things were just benefits for the wealthy people. And the people that were lower, like they had no money, they were like really unhappy with the situation, and more because he stayed like 30 years on the power, and he said that the presidents couldn't like made a re-election, but he was kind of smart because he was like in the power and then he got down and then he put in another one like for a year or two, and then he came back. Well, they were four, and then he came back, but meanwhile he was like not in the president. He was still telling the president that he chose to do whatever he wanted to do. Porfirio Diaz also reached a social and economical stability for Mexico, but after being so long in the presidency, he was exiled. But he also brought the ferrocarril, and he was exiled. He went to France, and then he died there.